Hi and welcome to another review from IndieGems, where we try to bring you the latest gameplay videos and reviews. Today we are looking at the Land of the Magnates, an action-adventure game very much along the lines of Prince of Persia, with lots of platforming, wall climbing, wall running and swinging on poles. It also contains a combat system based around musical notes, where enemies are defeated by pressing certain buttons on the controller. You play as Prince Shahbaz, who has been banished from the kingdom as part of an evil conspiracy to overthrow the monarchy. Your only salvation is to find a mythical musical instrument that will lift the darkness that has enshrouded the land. The story is inspired by myths of the Middle East like the Water Princess and the Monkey Kings, and has a distinct Persian feel. There is some lovely artwork in the form of a storyboard which depicts the tale in between levels, and there are dialogues between characters within the game, yet these are extremely brief and very amateurish. I understand that voice acting is not cheap, but the conversations are comedic and I'm not quite sure if they are meant to be, but after a while I found myself looking forward to these exchanges because they are hilarious to listen to. The story can be quite hard to follow sometimes, with some questionable sentence structuring, but it held the gameplay together and kept my interest.
His handwriting belongs to Shahbaz. She is at the palace balcony, where I first saw her. There must be a way out. I'm sure there is.
The gameplay mostly consists of platforming and combat. There are no puzzles if you are wondering, and the platforming can feel a little repetitive after a while because it rehashes the same thing over and over, just with an added mechanic here and there. Expect to be timing jumps, wall climbing and running, and using your musical abilities to create fire, ice or shock. The latter was the most interesting aspect of the platforming, requiring you to burn blockades, freeze platforms in place and explode walls to get through. Sometimes performing these abilities is needed on the fly and has to be done quickly before spikes appear on the platforms or the platforms disappear. A lot of the platforming is against the clock, so to speak, timing jumps and performing quick movements to get yourself out of trouble. The controls can feel a bit loose sometimes, resulting in many deaths where I would blame the controls. For example, towards the end of the game you are given the ability to perform a quick dash, where you have to hold sprint until the character changes stance and then release it to run. This works 75% of the time, but on occasions the character would start sprinting when I didn't want him to, resulting in trying to time his run rather than initiating it. I had issues with wall running, climbing walls and climbing ladders. The camera angles really don't help because they change direction frequently, which does make the visuals and the journey throughout the lands look more interesting, but it can play havoc with the direction of your character. For example, if you are running down a corridor pressing down, and the camera then swivels around, you have to change the direction to up, or else the character goes back the same way he came. It is fine when away from danger, but sometimes this happens when climbing a wall or a ladder, or sometimes worse, resulting in death. You begin the quest with 3 lives and 3 mana slots, but there is an opportunity to gain more of both if you can find hidden chests and repeat the musical combination by pressing certain buttons in a certain order which is shown to you before your attempt. These chests are always off the beaten path, but sometimes it is difficult to work out which way is the story path and which way is the chest path. And if you go down the story path by accident, sometimes it is not always possible to return to the junction and get the chest, which is annoying. 1 mana slot is used up after every special move in combat, or they can be used during platforming on rare occasions. There are lots of combat situations where you are locked in a section and have to defeat all the enemies before you can progress. These areas shrink in size and layers of platforms are added to make it more difficult as you progress. Combat is definitely the most difficult part of the game, and it can be very challenging but very rewarding to complete. To defeat the monsters, you have to get close to them and repeat the button sequence which appears above them. Each enemy has a different pattern, and because there can be multiple enemies at a time, this proves to be difficult, especially whilst enemies charge at you or teleport next to you, fire projectiles or appear from underground. There are a lot of things you have to think about, and it can be very frantic. Sometimes you need to think about a strategy to complete these sections, like climb up on the platform and use a special skill that can temporarily freeze them or burn them, and then climb down and try to defeat them whilst they are incapacitated, or defeat the enemies that come from underground first to make things easier. There is a surprising amount of tactical thinking needed, or else it just becomes too manic. When there are lots of enemies in a cramped space, you can slide dodge them to get to safety, but inevitably, whilst you're concentrating on one enemy, another one may teleport near you, or one fires a firebolt, or one manifests a molten rock where you stand. With all this going on at once, you sometimes get hit, which freezes you, and hit again and again and again before you can even move. I'm not sure if a temporarily invulnerability is needed after a hit to alleviate this issue. When you do die, and you will quite a lot, there is an annoying 10-second wait before you are able to play again, and sometimes it throws you back to a difficult platforming section rather than straight back into the fight. This feels incredibly frustrating. The download is over 18 GB, so I'm not quite sure why there are so many loading screens, and please just throw us back to where we died. For all its faults, the Land of the Magnates does provide an exciting and addictive ride, and I think it has nailed the difficulty curve so that you want to persevere and keep going. Yes, it has wonky controls occasionally, yes, it feels frustrating at times, and yes, the voice acting is cheesy and amateurish, but underneath all these issues lies a very entertaining game. I would suggest perhaps it is a little overpriced considering the game took around 10 hours to complete, but if you like a mixture of platforming and combat, which can be quite challenging, then I could recommend this one. Okay, that's all for our review of The Land of the Magnates. If you enjoyed it, please do visit the Steam store and wishlist it, and subscribe to our channel for more reviews in the future. Take a look at our curator on Steam too, where we release around 80 reviews a month, keeping you informed of all the latest releases. Thanks, and see you soon.